Welcome back to Texas in Focus. My guest on the program today is Kendall Scudder, the chairman of the Texas Democratic Party. Kendall, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, man. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start with this because it's not every day I have somebody on the podcast that's a former competitor in the world of podcasting. I know you for a few years had a podcast yourself, Pod Bless Texas, and it was like two 2018 era candidates coming together to kind of still make some positive progressive change after the election, if that sounds about right. Tell us about your experience with that in the world of podcasting and hosting your own podcast for many years.
We had a ton of fun with it. It was myself and Lillian Salerno who had run for Congress that year. And after my election, where I'd run for Senate and I lost, I mean, it was a long shot run, anyways. We knew that was going to happen. But um, we were sitting at a bar on election night and kind of commiserating. And she was like, "What's next?" I was like, "Well, I've got this idea and I've got the name." And she before too long, she'd already reached out to an attorney to get the trademark. So Pod Bless Texas was born. We did a couple years on that, a couple hundred episodes, and I mean it was a really fun experience. We really enjoyed it, and it was a little pre-pandemic, so the podcasting world was a little different than it is now. But it was there was just a big void, we felt like, for that space, and we enjoyed it, had a ton of fun, made lots of friends, and then she got appointed to the Biden administration. So, our game ended.
Well, let's talk about your current job now, the being the chairman of the Texas Democrats. You were elected last year in a pretty crowded field. I think it was seven candidates, which you ended up winning outright. What led you to run for chairman? And tell us the story. How'd you come out on top?
Yeah, so before I was chairman, I was the elected director of the appraisal district in Dallas County, and I've spent years in the grassroots of the party. I've started doing politics when I was 12, when Republicans were trying to take kids like me with same-sex parents out of our homes, and so I just have been an activist on the ground for years, and kind of frustrated. That might be the nicest way to say it, with the direction and the focus. And I've always been a big believer that the way we build this party is bottom up, it's not top down. There's no candidate you're going to recruit at the top of the ticket that's going to be this big savior that's going to save the whole team. It's a lack of infrastructure. That 30 years of neglect has gotten us to a point where, we had 36% of our precinct chairs full and 20% of our county chairs were vacant. So, largely in the panhandle, if you were a Democrat out there and you wanted to get involved and you wanted to be a part of it, there was nowhere to go and there was no one to engage with. So then you act shocked when you just get your clock cleaned out there. Well, of course you did. You don't even have a county chair, let alone precinct chairs. And, I'm not saying that that solves all the problems, but I am saying that if you build a model where everyone's working their precinct, right? Everybody doesn't have to be on a statewide level. Everybody knows their lane, knows their neighborhood, and is churning their votes out. It suddenly starts to look a lot different around here. And so we've been taking a bottom up approach and trying to rebuild the grassroots donor base of the party. In addition to all of that, we've recruited and trained over 800 precinct chairs to come in and fill spots. And we're just going to keep doing that work. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time for us to build it. But eventually, we should be in a position where, when it's time to put Texas in play for a presidential or when we have these special elections around the state, we should already have that infrastructure in place ready to go. And it's the biggest frustration over the last year has just been the amount of time it takes to build all of that. It just can't happen overnight, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Well, you're about a year in, so how do you feel about your progress up to this point?
I mean, you always want it to be further along than it is, especially if you're me. I mean, anybody that you know that knows me will tell you I'm a very impatient person. I want everything done yesterday. Now, that being said, we've made huge strides in a year that I think most people a year ago would have said were pretty impossible. We've paid off all the party's debt. We've secured a $30 million coordinated campaign. We've recruited a candidate for every state and federal office in Texas for the first time since 1972. We overperformed our special election in the Senate by 31 points and flipped a seat in the state Senate, which everyone always tells you your Democrats can't win any of those seats in the Senate. Well, we showed them you can with a real bottom up approach there. And we outvoted Republicans for the first time in over 20 years in this primary. And so, I mean, we're getting a lot of data points that are showing what we're doing is working. And it's a mix of national sentiment, but you can't accredit everything to national sentiment because the national sentiment isn't a 31-point overperformance. Right. I mean, like at some point that you have to realize that what we're building and what's happening here is been hugely successful. I just want more of it yesterday, and I need more resources to get it done. I need more people to get it done. But I'm happy with where we are compared to last year, and I expect to see those same kinds of progress between this year and next year. We can't just be happy we got a couple of W's in our column and move on. This is about building a long-term movement in this state that Republicans will never be able to overcome.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're leading a state party, though, that hasn't won power in 30 years, at least statewide elected power, then probably about 26 years since they were in power in the House, is there more pressure to perform just because you know it's so desperate, a victory so desperately needed? Or is there in some perverse ways less pressure to perform because people think, oh, he's not going to be able to do it anyway because nobody's done it? What's your thought on being chairman of this version of the Texas Democrats?
I think that what everyone's looking for in leadership of our party right now is they're looking for leaders who the pressure of this moment is sitting on their shoulders, right? It's not about comparing ourselves necessarily. It's not about trying to overcome whatever. It's about understanding what our failures consequences are
Mhm.
and leaving everything you have on the field. That's what people are looking for in our leaders. They want us to throw down and fight everywhere where we can and make sure that, you know, I've lost an election once by 7 votes.
Oh,
And when
sheesh.
you lose an election by 7 votes, you think excessively about every time you hit a snooze button. And I kind of have that mentality of like I'm really kind of overdo it because I know so many people are counting on us in Texas to meet this moment. And it sits on my shoulders very heavy. And so I wouldn't say that there's no pressure. I'd say there's a lot of pressure here because if we crack this code in Texas, it changes the course of history and for the better. And I don't want people's kids to be goose stepping through the streets. And so I take this moment very seriously, and only want to work with people who also do.
Absolutely. And we're about a month removed from the primary election, your first primary election as the chairman of the party. What are some of your top line thoughts? Obviously, some of the big stories were, Dems outperforming the Republicans, Tallarico winning, of course, on the other side, Cornyn and Paxton going to a runoff. But from the chairman's desk, what was some of what you took away from March 3rd?
Well, important thing to remember for people who may not be super in the weeds on all of this is that Texas has a unique system. We always do, where in Texas, the Secretary of State is not the chief primary administrator. The state party chairs are. In most states, the Secretary of State, the elections administrator, that's who runs the primary. But in Texas, the Democratic chairman runs the primary, the Republican chairman runs the primary. And so I don't have a lot of opinions about the primary because I love all my Democrats equally. I'm a real firm believer that this party doesn't belong to me. This party does not belong to party insiders or political consultants. This party belongs to the people of Texas. And I don't think that the party has always had a lot of respect for the electorate. So the electorate gets to make their decisions of who they want, and whoever they want, thrilled. Let's go. And so I don't form a lot of opinions. I've become friends with a lot of the candidates. I spend a lot of time around the state getting to know them. I knew Jasmine Crockett from her East Texas days. We're from the same county. We're both from Bowie County. And so I adored Sure, Congresswoman Crockett. And I've known James Tallarico from back in college Dem days when he was in the U Dems and I was at the same Houston State Dems. So, like, I've known them all for years. I love them. And I just have respect that the electorate's making the right decisions as we move forward. So, I think my biggest takeaway is going to be Democrats outvoted Republicans in Texas for the first time in over 20 years, and the candidates that the electorate chose to give me, clearly they were the ones that were able to mobilize the voters, and let's go. We got a work to do in November.
When you look at what's happened in past Novembers, you had 18 where you have the Beto thing, he comes within 2 points or 2.5 points of beating Ted Cruz. 2020, you lose the presidential race by 5.5 points. But then by 2024, it's 14 points again. What happened between 20 and 24 where seemingly the state Democrats lost so much momentum?
I think there's a pile of things. I mean, obviously the national sentiment in 24 wasn't on our side. That's going to be a setback. But also, I think anyone that fails to realize that the setback in Texas was because of 1.1 million Democrats who chose to stay home, then they're missing a point. If you take those 1.1 million Democrats who voted in 2020 and stayed home in 2024, they will tell you that this party negotiates away the things that are important to them and that they don't feel like we fight hard enough. Republicans have understood that if you stand up for your base, they'll show up for you. And the Democrats have spent more time on stages with Liz Cheney than with AOC and Bernie Sanders. I don't think that the Democrats have fully come to terms with the fact that you win elections by keeping your base happy. And so I view that as my role as the chairman of the party. If the Democrats aren't keeping the Democrats happy, I don't know who is. So if our candidates want to spend their time, the electorate makes the decision of who they nominate, what their strategies are going to be. My job is to make sure that Democrats are showing up to vote and that Democrats know that they have a home in our party. And so whether you are, Greg Casar or you are Henry Cuellar, you are under our umbrella and we're happy that you're here. But that doesn't mean that you tell the left side of your party to shut up and get in line like they have in the past. I'm from that wing of the party. And I don't think that telling people to shut up and get in line is a winning strategy ever, whether it's people on the left or it's people, in the Jasmine Crockett camp who didn't win an election. Our job is to earn those votes. It's not to tell somebody to shut up and get over it. And it's on us, it's on James Tallarico, it's on all of our candidates to earn the support of those people. And I believe you do that with big, bold, progressive ideas that change lives for working class people that our party have been known for. We're the party of the New Deal. We're the party of the Great Society. Recently, I've seen us as a party protecting institutions, and that's just not who we are. That's not the party that I signed up to be a part of. I was an East Texas farm kid that was only a Democrat because everything that existed in my life was given to me by the Democratic Party. We only had clean water and electricity because of the Democratic Party. My family was pulled from poverty in the Great Society. And so I don't care to preserve a bunch of institutions that have failed working class people. I want to see those systems overhauled. I want to see us come up with unique, brand new ideas to take on establishment to make sure that the little guy gets a seat at the table. And when we do that, those people who have stayed home for years will find us worth voting for. But choosing to stay home in an important election like 2024 is a message. And that message is the Democrats were not worth showing up for. And we can either argue with them and we can fight with them and try to explain to them why they're wrong, which has been the party's path of the past, or you can look in a mirror, own up to your mistakes, and try to make it right. And that's the path that I'm choosing to take.
When you talk about institutions, one institution that I can't help but notice changing pretty drastically in the last couple of years is the media. And it felt like this primary cycle was the first time where most of the people I talked to about politics seemingly were, getting their news from political influencers rather than perhaps a television. And I wonder because I follow a bunch of influencers now, and some of what you see is good, some of what you see is bad. They don't have the gatekeepers of the editors and stuff, so sometimes some misinformation gets in on there. How are you thinking about how the party should be embracing or not embracing influencers?
That's a great question. I think legacy media is not the prevailing source these days, particularly if you're a my demographic, right? I mean, if you're under the age of 40, it's just that's I've never watched an episode of Rachel Maddow. She seems like a nice lady, okay? But like that's just not where I'm getting my information. There are certainly people who still do, and that's an important factor, but it shouldn't be the end all be all of the way we do media. We have to get into the space of content creation, I think, as a party. We're having conversations right now about just completely rethinking and overhauling what it means to do comms at a state party. I don't know that many of these party apparatuses are doing it right. And I don't know that I have the answer to it. I think it's going to be a lot of trial and error. What I do know is that the first election I had a right to vote in was the Barack Obama election of 2008. And in that year, the Democrats were the cutting edge Facebook party. We were the party of technology. And I'm looking at us now, 18 years later, and we're still the Facebook party. We've never evolved outside of that. And I think that's a problem. There's becomes a question of resources and trying to get us there. You have to make sure things are still operational while you're rethinking things, which is kind of this um, tough tightrope to walk. But I think we've got some fun things coming down the pipeline at the Texas Democratic Party that you'll see or hear soon, where we're just doing things differently. And it may be a bust, it may not be what works, but I think the party should be an incubator of new ideas to be able to try those kinds of things. And because the party hasn't done it, no one is out advocating for the brand of the party, and it has struggled in a huge way. And so, as we're rebounding ourselves from the situation I inherited, we're getting to a spot where financially we can start to try and experiment some new things. I think you'll see some new things down the pipe, but I think that in order to be successful, this party has to completely throw out the rule book. And that scares a lot of people, makes people really uncomfortable. But what we've been doing clearly isn't working. It's a party with what, a 20% approval rating. So, like, if you think that the way you're going to fix this is by continuing to hang out on MS Now, you're sadly mistaken. I think that whatever the solution is to the messaging problem, whatever the solution is to the comms front for party apparatuses, I don't think it's been discovered yet. Not us, not the nationals. And until people are tinkering and playing with new things, they're not going to come up with it. And you can't be afraid of new ideas to get that accomplished.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this as we start to wrap up. We always like to wrap up on a lighter note. You, of course, like I mentioned, were a candidate in 2018. At that point, you were in your late 20s. You called it a long shot earlier in the interview, running that race. But what are some lessons like you took away from running for office in your 20s that, led to you now being the chairman of the state party? What was some stuff you learned even in defeat?
Yeah, I kind of always joke with people that I'm the Weeble of the Texas Democratic Party. Like, and for people who are maybe our age demographic and younger don't know what Weebles are, but in the 80s, the Weebles were these toys that you'd knock them down and they'd pop right back up. And Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down was their slogan. And I'm kind of the Weeble of Texas Democratic politics. I've been knocked down a lot. And it's not about me. It's not about like my own ambition for things. I've only done politics because I have a cause and kind of a North Star that I'm chasing. So it makes it really easy to keep bouncing back up and fighting when you get knocked off a horse. And so that is to me a really big lesson for anyone. It's that if you're doing it for the right reasons, it doesn't really matter how many times you lose. And it doesn't really matter how many punches you take. It doesn't really matter how many people don't like you. You've got a cause and you've got a purpose, and it makes it a lot easier to kind of tread that path forward. That would be number one, I think. Every time that I have run for office, and I've run a lot. I mean, when you're a Democrat in East Texas, y'all all sit in a room and say, "Okay, who's taking one for the team next?" And I've stepped up to do that plenty of times because I don't like when seats run run unopposed and when no one's throwing down and fighting. And so, I've taken my fair share of losses. But when you're making that decision to run, you should always do it for the right reason. You should do it because you have a clear purpose, not because you want to hold office. First time I ever ran was because a city councilman poked me in my chest and told me to sit down and shut the fuck up because we were trying to do redistricting reform to give students representation on the city council. And so it was like, yeah, I'll show you what sitting down and shutting up looks like, right? Because I had a lot of people that were counting on us trying to succeed there to give them representation in their government. And when I ran for Senate in 2018, it was the most conservative Republican seat in Texas. No Democrat had run in 20 years, but it was the guy who wrote the voucher bill before vouchers were in vogue, right? It was the guy who wrote the voucher bill, the guy who wrote the constitutional carry bill, permitless carry of firearms. It was the guy who had just written tons of terrible pieces of legislation, and I wasn't going to let him get a free pass. And it was the neighborhood and the communities that I'm from that that district went to. I talk like them. I think like they do, and I knew that I could communicate there. And I significantly overperformed a district that no one thought I was even in the realm of possibility for. You got the results on election day, and you were like, oh shit, he might have been in the realm of possibility there. But it was with no money, no resources, but it was because it was important. It was a fight worth having. And so that is what I impose on any young person looking to run. It shouldn't be because you want to be relevant. It shouldn't be because you want to hold office. It should be because there's a fight worth having, and you're the right one to fight that fight. So that's number one. Number two, if you sit around and wait your turn, it's never going to be your turn. Everyone tells you to wait your turn because they think it's their turn. And it will always be that case. So if you have a cause that's important to you and you're the right messenger for it and you're ready to put in the work for it, go for it. Have some respect for the electorate. The electorate will make that decision. If they weren't ready for you, they'll throw you out. And that's okay. But like the party needs to learn how to respect the electorate, in my opinion, and trust that they're making the best judgments for their communities. And then the third point that I would make is if you're going to jump in and run for office, make sure that you're surrounding yourself with people who have your best interest in mind, because there's lots of competing voices that all are looking out for their own pet items and issues. And you need to make sure someone's looking out for you, because you'll get a lot of really bad advice along the way from a lot of people who, have whatever agendas they have. And I sometimes lose sleep at night over who's looking out for our candidates because a lot of them are first time candidates who've never run for anything before, and they're being surrounded by people saying, take out another mortgage on your home, put all this money into it. And we need to be supporting those people that are stepping up to take one for the team here, or to throw down and slog and try to get one across the finish line for us. And that's kind of what I view my role as now. And I think the way I got from losing candidate to eventually winning candidate to here
Mhm.
was that I've always treated everybody I interact with respect. I don't think anybody that's ever worked with me has felt like I have ulterior motives. I usually lay everything out on the table and I'm overly honest with people to a point that's sometimes a little offensive and brash, but I just, everybody knows what I'm shooting to do, where I'm angling. And I think that people wanted a party leader who was going to be honest enough to rebuild the party from scratch and who was going to throw down and fight for causes that were important. And I'm going to do that as long as the electorate and the Dems let me do it, because I think that I've rose to the occasion to some extent. There's shortcomings I wish I had more bandwidth to accomplish, but I'm really proud of what we got done in just a year. I think that in November, people are going to be looking at Texas as the state that completely transformed American politics. And it's going to be because all of us rolled up our sleeves and did the nitty gritty work to get it done.
Absolutely. And I will close with this one. Before November, you've got June, your first state convention as state party chairman. What's your pitch? Why should Democrats make the trek down to Corpus and come hang out with y'all in June?
Well, you certainly should. You only have until April 13th to get added to the delegate rosters. So, number one, you better figure it out real fast and reach out to your county chair. If you're in an urban county, we probably still have vacant spots. Even some rural counties, we have some vacant spots, but urban counties tend to have a hard time kind of filling their number of folks. So certainly figured out. Here's why I'd tell you to go. If you have ever sat around thinking, I have real problems with where the party stands on something, positions in the platform, things you want to see in the direction. This is where you fix it. So you either sit at home and complain and whine about it, or you get your hands dirty and figure it out. And your first convention, you're probably not going to really understand or know everything that's happening all the time. It's going to take a little bit of kind of acclimation, but you'll be in the room where it's happening, where we're passing our platform, where we're passing our resolutions, what we stand for, and what we're doing. And you can engage in that process, and we'd love to have you as a part of it. This is how you retake a party and fix it. So sit around, complain about it, or grab the bull by the horns and ride it. Corpus Christi is where you're going to do that. Number one. Number two, we're going to have a lot of really exciting speakers. I haven't announced all of those folks yet, but we've got quite a roster. This is the largest convention for Democrats in the country. We're going to be larger than the DNC this year, I think, the national convention. And so you're going to have national figures parading around our hall trying to get you anybody who wants to run for president in 2028. If they're smart, they'll be there because you got to win Texas on Super Tuesday to be serious. And so I think you're going to have a lot of national figures as well as state figures that want to meet you and want to be held accountable by you. And so this is your chance to do it. Or you can just sit home and whine and complain and talk about how nobody else is doing the job right while you don't step up to do it yourself. So you decide what you want to do. I'm going to be in Corpus Christi, and I hope that you'll be there with us.
I think that's a perfect place to close. Kendall Scudder is the chairman of the Texas Democratic Party. Kendall, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.